Okay, here's coming up to the fort site. Not very far at all. That is actually the St. Mark's River. Correct what I said earlier, it was actually the Wakulla River we were looking at the earlier position. And this tiny Spanish fortification was first in a series of forts used to protect the Spanish mission train, but also I believe was a good source where ships would come up and get fresh water that was just flowing out of Wakulla Springs in the St. Mark's River. And so this is the corner looking at the confluence of the river. A very strategic point. And let's go over here. Looking out. Out into the river that goes out into the Apalache Bay. A lot of history happened at this point right here. You had the Narvaez expedition, the failed Spanish conquistador, that came here in 1528. Had 300 men. By this point, most of them been killed by Indians, and they built rafts here to head back to Mexico, where many of them were wiped out by a gale or a hurricane. And of those 300 men, only 4 survived, made to Mexico City 8 years later. One of the survivors of the Narvaez expedition, Cabeza de Vaca, he wrote about his exploits, and it's been translated and republished, and makes a very interesting read. We're in the roots of these cedar trees right here, and there's some looks like more Yaupon holly right underneath it. Interesting. But then the Spanish mission chain was started after 1590, and you can visit Fort San Luis up in north of Tallahassee, or north of town, and we'll visit that on our trip. But you had the fort here that the Spanish built. Then this area was susceptible to raids of pirates, so much so that the Spanish at one point abandoned the fort and burned it to the ground, and the pirates actually captured the fort at one point. Thinking the fort was stone, they found out the fort was wood painted to look like stone, so the pirates got bold and attacked. But also, who was considered a pirate was William Augustus Bowles. Established the Free State of Muskogee, and the state had undefined borders, but it was an independent Indian nation. And he captured Fort St. Mark's in 1791 and held it for 5 weeks until Spanish soldiers arrived and took it back. And that's an interesting bit of history. Okay, now we're going to go up in one of the fort bastions. Fort St. Mark's is the only real significant First Seminole War site that you can see today, or at least see in some interpretation. Andrew Jackson came here in 1818, got the Spanish to surrender, and used it as his base of military operations in North Florida. And there's a stone, I guess it's Charles Diedrich, age 75. But here we are on top of the corner bastion, or gun emplacement. And I don't think Andrew Jackson ever surrendered the fort or gave it back to Spain at the end of the First Seminole War. And they continued the American occupation until Spain ceded Florida to the United States. I'll have to check on that. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but I think that might be true. Well, this is the Fort St. Mark's. I'm almost out of battery on the camera. Interesting for Seminole history, William Augustus Bowles established the Free State of Muskogee and declared war on Spain. Andrew Jackson occupied the fort during the First Seminole War, tried and hanged and shot 2 British citizens, Arbuthnot and Captain Ambrister, Marine Captain. Very significant First Seminole War history. And then this area was a hospital, a Navy hospital in the 1850s, and a Confederate hospital during the Civil War. That's San Marcos de Apalache, or Fort St. Mark's in St. Mark's, Florida. It's a really nice place to visit. Now, one of the big ironies is that the plaque to Millie Francis, honoring her and saving the U.S. soldier, her father, Josiah Francis, was hanged by Andrew Jackson probably at the site. Jackson captured Josiah Francis during the First Seminole War. He'd been after Francis since the Creek War. Francis was one of the Red Stick leaders who made demands of ammunition and gunpowder from the Spanish. So one of the main reasons Jackson came into Florida is that he's going after Josiah Francis, and captured him under putting a British flag on a American ship and probably bringing in here and hanging him. So that's kind of a interesting tidbit of history. You hang the guy here and there's a plaque honoring his daughter who saved an American soldier. And that is Fort St. Mark's.